Are we rolling?
I think we're good.
Start us up.
All right, so now looking in the camera.
Hello, it's been a while.
Long time no see. Good to see you again.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Brett. We're back.
But you know, I have a tendency to gesticulate. I talk with my hands.
I mean, I've made so many different things. I'm just trying to think, like, what else do I do?
You're interviewing, what, 10 artists to do this? So even if you get 2 seconds from me.
I was pleasantly surprised by who and what the Wellin was.
Now they've kind of spoiled the rest of my career because they've set the bar really high in terms of how something can happen.
My experience working with Wellin, I kind of think of as actually working with Tracy, because I feel like they're very much the same.
I'm Tracy Adler, Johnson Poe Director of the Ruth and Elmer Wellin Museum of Art here at Hamilton College. My mother was an artist, so I spent a lot of time around art. Every weekend when I was growing up as a family, we went to a museum. I think traditionally museums were almost like these hallowed institutions. You'd go into one, you feel like you have to whisper, you feel like you have to behave yourself.
I don't know, it doesn't feel like a museum in the sense of what I'm used to.
Thinking about a museum in terms of really its potential of what it can be like the center for a community. Being able to tell an artist, let's do this show together, it's kind of like one of those magical moments that you remember that moment.
I was actually talking to her because I was thinking of proposing a show as a curator, but she said, I would really like to show your work, Julia. And that was one of the happiest days of my life.
She had invited me to the Wellin on a couple occasions to see shows that were up. In my eyes, she was also kind of just showing me the possibilities of my work and what my work could look like in the space.
I can't imagine what she was envisioning then, because I couldn't have imagined at that time what I'm doing now.
I actually didn't realize how much she was interested in my work, and I was really flattered, that she had followed it so closely all those years. I didn't really know.
Doing a show in the Visual Arts Center in New Jersey, Tracy heard about the show, was wondering if it could travel. Beautiful places, beautiful, it was a brand new museum. I think I was the second person to show there.
And it all began because, I have to tell you this little story, it began the first time that Susanna and I spoke on the phone. We didn't know each other. I was like at the point, well, if I don't like you, I'm gonna pull out of this one. I asked her, I said, I've seen this photograph of Frederick Douglass, and he's very young in it, and he's at some sort of a convention. Do you know what I'm talking about? And she said, that's the Casnovia convention, and the photograph's held in the next town over. So that's how I knew I needed to be doing this work there.
Well, prior to the Wellin Museum, over the last 150 years, there had been many different art venues on campus. But there hadn't been a standalone proper museum. The building was built in 2012. The Theater and Studio Arts building, the Kennedy Center across the street, was built 2 years later. We're right across the street from the Art History Department, which is in a McKim Mead and White building. A real emphasis on the arts, which I think has drawn not just a lot of students here, drew me here, and I know it's drawn a lot of my colleagues here as well.
You also have people who have chosen to go to this destination school to think, to learn, to look.
Picture Hamilton College without the Wellin, because it has made its place there.
And I think the Wellin, in its founding, I don't know, it's not a small component of Hamilton. It's actually kind of like a feather in its cap.
It just seemed like an amazing proposition to be able to build a museum from the ground up.
We were talking about what makes a museum building a success. And Tracy said something really incredible that I hope I get this right, but I think she said, the program drives the building. And I thought that's fascinating because most of the time in contemporary art museums, the building drives the program.
Every time we do an exhibition, the space of the gallery is totally transformed.
I went and saw, actually before my show, an exhibition by Yun-Fei. When you walked into the galleries, there was no obvious directive as to where to go, but you intuitively were guided. Clearly, it made perfect sense. And sometimes that's not just about a white wall and bright light. You know, there's ways of working with color and subtlety that direct us in a space, maybe subconsciously.
It's not easy to just put a sculpture in space. You have to really understand how people are going to walk around it, how they're going to feel.
The sort of extra mile they went to try to present the work, it's very unusual.
And that exhibition really, it exuded the love, you know, because the care with which the work was also installed, I mean, it was next level.
My experience of that architecture was really intimate, meaning I was in the ceiling, I was on the floor. There was no limit, really, in that way. And so the building became, in some ways, almost like a treehouse. There were these incredible performances. There was a really amazing dance performance. There was a sound art performance. One thing that really stood out for me was a project that students created where they acoustically animated the work by singing through the pieces. Made me excited about dealing with sound as a vibrational component.
Really, it was that very first time I walked through the galleries. And I all of a sudden got the feeling, oh my God, I can create a smaller room inside a room. So my whole idea for an abolitionist room was to create a room so that when no one was in the room with them, they could talk. And if anyone came in the room, then they could join in the conversation with them.
Tracy had asked me early on, she said, is there any, like, let's talk about your interest in fashion. Nobody had ever asked me that before. I think with the kind of like the weighty cultural narratives, it almost feels like the antithesis of that. So nobody wants to bring in something so kind of superficial and light into the conversation. The garment was hung kind of in the center of the room, which to this day, I generally have to fight for. It just worked.
ግን ራሱ ለኔ እዛ መሄድ ለኔ አንድ ትምህርት ነው ብዬ ነው የምገምተው። ምክንያቱም አትሞስፌሩ ራሱ ለኔ ትምህርት ነው። ቦታው እና ያሳለፍኩት ቀናቶች በሙሉ ቆንጆ።
The Wellin and Tracy, in my case, wanted to show my paintings and also this graphic novel I had been working on. And so the Wellin published that graphic novel. It's called Playground of My Mind. And they even made a play area to go along with it. And that couldn't have been more appropriate.
That was a big show for me. There were a lot of pieces in that show. People got a chance to see how my work had evolved from the 1990s, and it wasn't what a lot of people expected.
I was able to do probably the largest string drawing that I've done. It was also a really good opportunity to see a lot of my work together in the same space at the same time and see how work played off each other. Played off the video, the string drawing, and the sculpture.
At that time, I had some family situation where I had to travel back to China and back and forth. So it was very intense for me as well, to make the new work for the show. Make you kind of think of your work in a deeper way.
That show and what I added to it, that's a major part of the story that I'm still writing today.
Tracy was familiar with the body work I was doing at that point. She invited me up to the Wellin to visit, and we had dinner there, and I explained to her that I was having this life-changing event. And I had just gotten contact with a side of my family that I had been estranged from, had no contact with, and that I was considering what would happen if I were to start visualizing this and making work about it. She didn't encourage me one way or another. She was just there in support of whichever direction I needed to go at the time. And I really appreciated that. So I felt really comfortable with her and decided that the Wellin was the place for me to explore this life-changing event.
Well, Clinton is a little Hamlet. It's like something, a postcard.
Even the drive up there is so beautiful. I feel like that stretch of road is one of the few times in my life where I calm down.
Clinton, New York was quiet, and you could sit outside and you could see the stars. It was that first realization that Hamilton College sat right along the abolitionist trail. And even going back to Gerrit Smith, who's such an important abolitionist, to hear that his father donated the land that Hamilton College sits on originally. That discovery was spectacular.
I think about the kind of time that gets created and the slowing down that's provided that allows for these students to be thinking these very big thoughts.
That act of it being a teaching museum is instrumental for the artists as well as for the student body at the school.
The Wellin put together some really interesting combinations of me and students. So it wasn't just art classes.
Faculty actually immerse the students into the exhibition and the dialogue. It showed me that, this is a university that was ready.
For me, this is a work that continues to be sculpted, not by me, but by the students.
They had this session where students sat around the table with me, and we just talked about what it is why I do my work. And I got a chance to talk to students about very personal things that went into the work, not just the idea of like color or form, but emotionally what I put into it. And it was a very intimate thing to have happen in a museum setting. I'd never experienced that.
It's not as though they're just kind of being taught how something can happen. They're actually shaping it.
The crew that helped me make the murals were all students. For 2 weeks straight, we worked together.
And these were like the best students. They were amazing. They came ready to work. I could show them how to do a process one time, and they just took it from there. At heart, I'm a teacher. I was raised by a teacher. Everything that we were doing was applied sciences, I'm teaching woodblock printing to these students, and there are stakes involved. We're creating a piece of art together that is going to be in a museum show once we finish.
ተማሪዎቹም እንደዚህ በፍቅር ነበር የሰራነው። በቆንጆ ፈገግታ፣ በቆንጆ ዲሲፕሊን ነው የጨረስነውና ሙዚቃ ሲሰሙ ራሱ አብረን ስንንቀሳቀስ አይነት ነው ስሜቱና አብሮ መስራት አንድ ነገር ይለውጣል ብዬ ከማምን ሰዎች ነው። እድሜ አይወስነውም ብዬ አምናለሁ። ትምህርት የሚያገኙበት የሰጠውበት
It's very far-reaching, and it gives them real experience that's transferable to careers in real life, even if it's not art careers. Like, we're not necessarily super focused on creating the future art historians. We want people to be lifelong lovers of art.
I guess there's a time, I think, in artists' careers where you start opening up to ideas that have been sitting in your head for a really long time, and the exhibition at the Wellin was one of those experiences.
We're also helping artists as they're saying like, oh, I want to do this, and we try and facilitate that, whether it's like providing the technical expertise, connecting them with others who might have expertise.
The video, I Was Here, was one that had been in my mind for years. But this was the opportunity that, when there was support for it, I was introduced to Brett Novak and was able to go to Mississippi to my father's reservation to work on that video. That was the other thing. I had the chance to work with Tanya Tagaq, which I don't think I ever would have thought that actually would have happened.
To have the chance to do murals again. That opportunity was such a blessing.
I felt encouraged and supported with Tracy in the Wellin in a way that, was really unique, and of course led to me making like a 40-foot by 15-foot mural. I knew that they had the trust in me to pull off something like that.
I think that they do really, really wonderful job of nurturing artists who are young in their career.
That was a very interesting learning experience for me to have to learn how this whole process and collaborating with the technicians there to out of realizing some of the ideas.
I want them to have a great experience here so that even if they go to other museums and maybe they're not as included in all of these processes, at least they know what those processes are. We've also contributed so much scholarship to the field. We've done 15 books in 10 years.
Yes, a publication for an exhibition is as important as the exhibition itself.
The work has a life, and the pieces can be modified and live somewhere else, but the publication allows the work to have a greater time span.
It's a record of the show, but it's more than a record of the show because it's also these great scholarly contributions from stellar curators or scholars or academics or artists.
The gift of the Wellin was really the production of such a beautiful catalog. I cried when I saw the catalog.
The quality of printing and the reproduction of the artworks and the layout and the design.
It's not a standard museum catalog. I said to them, I was like, think album covers, think like Italian Vogue, like I want full bleed images. I returned to that book for a lot of things. It's almost like I can see my work more clearly through this kind of like heightened lens.
As an artist, you almost have this feeling of like, oh yeah, of course, that is how the exhibition lives on.
We spent a lot of time on it. Tracy and I and the designer spent many, many hours working on that catalog.
We don't have a publications department. It's like me, my team, our graphic design team, Tim Lown and Natalie Wedeking, and we work really hard to make these books as good as they can possibly be.
To put together a show and a book, that's really amazing.
Even when people look at that catalog today, the first thing they say to me is like, this is a gorgeous book, and there's a chance you may never get a catalog this beautiful again. And now I know what that means. It has become the sort of example that I send to people when I say, this is the book that excites me.
It was so important to me as an artist. And those books have been so important to me as an artist.
It meant so much to me and still means so much to me. In the art world, I have one of the most beautiful catalogs. That's the way that I feel.
Artists are often the first ones to really articulate complicated issues through their own personal perspective and viewpoints. They're the kind of canary in the mine, I guess I would say.
Tracy is one of my favorite kinds of curators, where they're not really taking their cue from the art world. Tracy is about discovery.
She's finding like some really important stuff, because I remember after my show, another great show came in. She was open to the ideas, and at this time, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff, people talking about decolonize the space, and I was kind of a bit of an outlier at that time.
I really felt at the beginning like, wow, they're bringing a textile fiber artist in, which is not the sexy part of the art world. And they're willing to stretch this out with me. That was very significant.
And I think it's important when a museum doesn't play it safe and decides to do a show of somebody's work that's underexposed.
There's so much going on in the world, and there's a lot of critical and difficult conversations happening. Having challenging conversations is the only way that we're going to grow. It's the only way that we're going to move forward.
lot of times you will not have a supportive group that will deal with the challenges, that will deal with the resistances, and that will stand up and say, hey, we're having this dialogue because it's important. This Space in Between project exists in the form of a sewing, embroidery, and sculpture making workshop.
And so she was working with community members who were not artists, and so they were real stories of real people.
It's inviting the immigrant communities to share their border crossing story, to literally deconstruct a Border Patrol uniform and embroider with colorful thread their border crossing story to transform this uniform into something new.
I think what the Wellin and Tracy really were able to do was to be unafraid to be very progressive in their perspective in those conversations.
And I don't think there's anything to be afraid of. There's nothing to protect. I think we're going to learn so much in the future about this moment now.
When communities see their efforts celebrated by institutions, by universities, by governmental groups, it gives them a sense of accomplishment, of acknowledgement. It gives them a sense of being seen and being respected, and it uplifts their spirits.
When Tracy and Catherine came to the studio in the winter of 2019, there was no way of knowing that an exhibition that we were planning to have open in the fall of 2020 was going to be one that was enveloped by the conditions that we've been living in during the era of COVID-19. To know that the exhibition was still going to happen and that the conditions were going to be created where we could continue to work here in the studio and to fill that space, I think it gave me and the entire studio team a lot of hope. And I've been having to teach also during this time. And one of the things that I do when I teach art remotely is to remind everyone that it's true. We can't be together. We can't be in the wood shop making something together. We can't be carving stone together. But look at this work that was made by soldiers that were sent to the front in World War I, where one soldier from France had actually carved the names of his kids into a leaf. And you realize that in that moment of urgency, there's a desire to engage with material and transformation and expression.
Like when I'm talking about doing a show, I'm okay with saying and we put all of our love into it, because we really do.
There wasn't a single individual that I felt was sort of removed or doing this in a rote way. To verge on hyperbole, it felt like this family.
It felt like I had the support of a whole team at the Wellin.
Really feel like I had friends. I had this new place of friendship that was very lovely.
It was incredible because in all the remote conversations, I always felt really healthy. It felt warm, it felt healthy, it felt generative, it felt right. And then when we met in person, it was yeah, of course, right? This is what this place is. These are who these people are.
And the fact that they actually did acquire a piece for the collection was even, that was icing on the cake.
The House of Chance and Mischief is the piece that's in the Wellin. And I am so happy that they purchased that piece for their permanent collection. It's one of my favorites. I had fun making it. I was listening to all kinds of funk music while I was creating it.
And then the fact that I still have that piece, well, I have two works, I guess, permanently on view at Hamilton College. So I have one in Archive Hall in the museum and one in the math building. And I'm really, really proud of that.
It's a relationship that I don't want to end when the show ends. I look at that as like a lifelong endeavor. The show is the spark, but those relationships will endure.
Our calls at this point are rarely about, professional things. Like, we really did become friends.
I like that the relationship has continued on a personal level after having, experienced doing the exhibition at the Wellin, that Tracy is that kind of person that you stay connected to.
ትሬሲ በደስታ የምትቀበል ፍቅር የምትሰጥ እና ብዙ ነገር የምታቃልል የእሷ አቋም የድርጅቷ አቋም ነው የሚመስለውና
even the one person make a very big difference for an institution,
She's just really smart and pulling off these incredible shows. And it was really her relationships, that whether it was galleries or artists, were kind of like, yeah, we'll show up for Tracy.
I'm really proud of the work that I've done here. That's hard for me to say because it means that I'm like taking like I don't want to say, I guess it's not all me, it's everybody. People who went alongside, who went on the journey with me, there's so many people who have been there and who have been a part of the story of the museum becoming what it is today. And I'm really proud of that.
So on a very personal level, I have often had tremendous dread of installs. Every install has been terrifying in advance, and this install was a total joy. That totally shifted my relationship to having these installations. I thought, oh, well, if the community structure is different, it can be a great joy the whole way through.
Coming here really reinvigorated my hope and belief in the power of art.
Somebody asked me the other day, they said, what's your best experience working with an institution? And I sat down and thought about it, and I said, you know what? It was the Wellin Museum and Tracy Adler.
The ethos and the educational experience that was unflinching is something I've not come across, quite frankly.
I think sometimes like artists just really need that kind of like recognition and support to feel like, people are interested and that they should keep going.
This is the kind of museum experience every artist should hope to have.
That show really was such a major change in my life. Kind of opened the door into a whole world for me.
I just love the fact that, somebody respects my work enough to want to do a show.
ምክንያቱም ከመስራት ያስደስታል። ፍቅር አግኝቶ መስራት ደግሞ የበለጠ ያስደስታል።
I often have wondered, well, what does it mean to do this for my whole life? And to have a new way of thinking about that on a sort of emotional level is a really significant thing.
I know that being here is a privilege, and I want everyone who comes here, whether it's an artist or a student, to feel how special it is to be here.
You know, there's a lot of museum directors and curators who will invite an artwork. You know, the Wellin Museum invites artists.